Welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute devotional podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse. Broadcast from the ever-beautiful Sharonville, Ohio, on the sunny side of Cincinnati. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro. Come on in. Get yourself something cold or hot to drink. Sit down here with me and let's open our Bibles. Today, actually all this week, we're going to be studying Psalm 143. This is another Psalm of David. And this particular Psalm is our 7th and final penitential prayer. David has sort of strewn these out throughout the Psalter. We have them placed conspicuously all throughout the book of the Psalms. And so here we have the last of the 7, and Psalm 143. It is divided into 2 pieces. So we're going to look at verses 1 through 6 and then 7 through 12. You'll notice that the division occurs with a Selah. We have a Selah, and only one, right in the middle. And so we're dividing 2 different prayers here in this one psalm. This has led some to argue that what we have here is the voice of Christ in the first prayer and the voice of the church in the second prayer, which, if you look at some of the things that are said there, in verse 3, again in verse 4 and 5, verse 6, we have things that we could say are messianic here. This could be a prayer that he prayed while in the tomb. Just like Jonah prayed in the belly of the whale, so Christ could have prayed this in the tomb. Even though dead, yet his soul was praying. And then we have in the second prayer, beginning in verse 7, the voice of the church. And the voice of the church is all about asking the Lord to deliver her and to teach her and to lead her and to quicken her and to give her victory over the enemies that surround her and so forth. So beautiful in its construction. It is lovely in all that it teaches us. Strap in, because we're going to look at 2 beautiful prayers this week. And today we're going to start with verses 1 and 2 in the first prayer. And we'll call this first prayer the prayer of Christ to his Father. Hear my prayer, O Lord. Give ear to my supplications. In thy faithfulness answer me, and in thy righteousness. And enter not into judgment with thy servant, for in thy sight shall no man living be justified. So we begin with the first prayer, and you'll notice that we're going to begin both these prayers in the same way. Here in verse 1, hear my prayer. In verse 7, hear me speedily, O Lord. And so he's asking the Lord here in verse 1 to hear him. Notice the language, hear, give ear to, answer me. So this is the request that he's making. I'm making this prayer, please hear me and answer me. Verse 2, enter not into judgment. In the first verse, we have the do this request, right? This is the hear me, answer me, listen to me, give ear to me supplication. And of course, we know the promise that he's always going to hear us. But then in verse 2, we have the don't do this part. And that is repeated in verse 7. We have a do this and a don't do this in the very beginning of the second prayer. But here we have the don't do this, don't enter into judgment with thy servant. And of course, we know that we want to pray this prayer, don't we? Because we want God to be merciful to us, and his mercy is expressed here in Psalm 143 because he's listening. What we don't want him to do is enter into judgment, because we can't survive that. And he even says that here in verse 2, for in thy sight shall no man living be justified. We understand that, because if we're going to be compared to him, if we're going to enter into judgment with him, that is, he's going to be the prosecuting attorney, we won't survive that, because the corruption and stain of original sin and the reality of actual sin in our life, ladies and gentlemen, will doom us before a righteous and holy God if we say, oh sure, I'll go to the judgment bar and argue my case. You cannot argue your case and win. So do this, hear my prayer, don't do this, enter not into judgment with your servant. Now tomorrow we'll take up 3 and 4, and we'll see the reason why he's making this prayer. This is the messianic part, This is the complaint part, and we'll see the result beginning there tomorrow in verse 4. So I hope you'll join me then on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. I'm David Smith. The music today has been performed by the Bluegrass Experiment. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time on Daily Dose Radio.